listening to Inclusive AF with Jackye Clayton and Katee Van Horn.
Hi, and welcome to the Inclusive AF podcast. I'm Jackye Clayton.
And this is Katee Van Horn. And we have an awesome, fun guest with us today, Rowdy Duncan. And I'm not going to say his middle name because I want him to, because it's my favorite part. So Rowdy, thank you so much for joining us. We're really happy to have you here. And we're doing a little bit of a crossover today because Rowdy is a podcaster as well. So we are podcasting on our end this time, and then we'll go visit him on his podcast at some point in the future. So we're doing this is a slight crossover, if you will. So Rowdy, thanks for joining us. Would love to start off with just a little bit about your identity. So who is Rowdy Duncan? And you have to tell them your middle name too.
Yes, I'll get to that for sure. So my given Western name is Rowdy Sunray Duncan. In my culture, Taos Pueblo, it's you take the surname of your godfather. And so my native name is Rowdy Sunray of the Good Morning. And I am mixed with Tao is Eastern Band Cherokee, and then white Welsh. The white thing is always really hard to really distill down. But being mixed race and being indigenous in this country is a very interesting process. And growing up in Texas, that's where my roots are. There's not a lot of other native people in Texas. And so you kind of get lumped in with Hispanic people. But in that, I found that you can create dynamic community and people that love and got your back. And that people will love and adopt you for who you are, even if you don't understand all the things that are happening. Like when I used to get yelled at, apácate, I learned to understand that means calm down, relax, don't be so excited in my house, because I got adopted by the abuelas and everything. So yeah, it's part of what drives me, is who I am, and the fact that I've always needed a community and a space where I didn't always have folks around me.
Awesome. And tell us a little bit about what you do today. So obviously you have your podcast, and I'd love for you to share a little bit about that, but also what your day job is, what you do as a grown-up.
Yes. So my podcast is Inclusive Activism, and I'm very excited that y'all have agreed to join me on Inclusive Activism, because I love picking the brains of folks that do the same type of work, because I really think being inclusive and moving to being more of an inclusive person is a way of healing ourselves as people. It's a way of building capacity and becoming a better human. I think we all heal as we do these processes. I think it's a form of leadership development as well as a form of healing for all people that do it. Because we all struggle with some of these things sometimes when we're really being honest with who we are. And I am a communication professor at Phoenix College. So I get to teach interpersonal communication, which some of these issues pop up in, and then intercultural communication, which these issues are all over the place in. And I really love what we do in the communication field, because the way I try to describe it is communications is like the spells of being that we create things into being with, right? So the way we communicate are spells of value for some people, or things or backgrounds or ideas, or we communicate disvalue into being with certain things, ideas, or ways of being. And so really looking at how we talk about things, how we value things, how we disvalue things, how we other certain folks, how we include other folks, gives us a sense of the patterns that we get into, that shows us how the world comes into being and how we replicate it by the way we talk about stuff.
Awesome. So, I think communication is one of the pieces that we want to dig in on. And, I think every time that I'm working with the client, one of the pieces that is a major piece of the strategy is always that communication plan. And so I want to just talk a little bit, and I think even spreading that a little bit further to your point of that cultural communication, how you do that the right way. And so would love for you to share a little bit about your thoughts on, where does communication come into the conversation around inclusion and diversity?
For me, I think my scholarship, and I'm really not a big fan of using that word, because I think the hoity-toityness of my field is really something that turns me off. But I like to look at communication from a systemic view and from a critical lens. And I like it looking at things through the critical lens first, because there's always something to improve on through a critical lens. Now, through critical scholarship, one of the things that fails us is it just shows us where the problems are and doesn't make any suggestions on how to fix it. I had some students listen to Ta-Nehisi Coates, and they were really like just bummed out because they're like, well, what do we do? You know, Ta-Nehisi, and he's like, I don't know, I'm a critical scholar. I don't like tell you how to fix the problem. I tell you what the problem is. And they're like, well, I don't know what to do. And I'm like, well, that's his job, is pointing out the problem, right? Like, it's his specialty. That's what makes him dynamic and amazing. But then the other part is systemics. What are the patterns that happen that put things into play? Why are you having a hard time hiring folks of marginalized backgrounds? Why, when you hire them, do they leave? Why do they choose not to stay, right? Because I know you all find this all the time. Everybody wants to hire diversity. Nobody wants to think how to keep diversity once it's hired, because they just get in this cycle of hiring and having people leave because their culture's not really welcoming to it. So for me, it's about really analyzing how you talk about things every day. I think one of the good places to add communication into what they do is like having like an inclusive moment, or the inclusive idea of the day, and like a 5-minute conversation at the start of a meeting about these like ideas and concepts, and having folks like kind of grapple with that, and put spaces of mutual accountability, right? And y'all do that really well, right? Like I hear y'all do that with your ability stuff, and like be like, don't call it crazy, like use other language around that stuff, right? And my favorite sub for crazy is bananas, so I'm trying to use bananas all the time because there's no like connotation with bananas other than the physical banana. But really getting to see how communication is the beginning of the pattern, and if you can start to like, you first have to start with how you think about things, but then how you speak about things is how you start the process of making things into being. And language is that place where and y'all are really great with that. I see you have your she, her in there all the time with your pronouns, and I think that's lovely. I love that, and I do that. But coming from indigenous cultures, we don't always say and do those things because that wasn't a big deal for us. Because we were just like, oh yeah, this person's two-spirited, and they're like, what does that mean? And I'm like, it means they're just two-spirited, like they're just different, and that's cool. And we should ask them questions because they see the world different, and they'll teach us stuff. So I'm kind of like in a middle space where I want to adopt those things, or like come from an indigenous perspective of it's perfectly natural and maybe doesn't need to be talked about all the time. So I'm kind of in that middle balancing space, but it's really, for me in my work, I love trying to get people to change how they think about talking about things and challenge, hopefully first and foremost yourself, because everybody loves pointing out what everybody else is doing wrong. Like, I would love to see a place where like we're focused on us first, and then I ask you to help me with me instead of patrolling everybody else in their behavior, because I think that's a place people get stuck a lot.
I think, you bring up a good point. I just read literally this morning On Tyranny by Timothy Snyder. And one of the things that he talks about in regards to language is adopting language that other people use to explain situations. Like they were talking about some of the campaign language are using extremists, which really isn't a thing, but then we're numb to it. We equate it with maybe terrorism because they put those in the same sentence when they're so completely different, so that we don't recognize people being extreme unless they then riot, right? Like we don't see that we have been breeding extremism through this process and getting numb to it and using other words. I always think it's funny because, like we don't cuss on our podcast, but if anybody knows us personally outside of a work scenario, we use 4-letter words on a regular basis. And so I know it's a secret, not Katie. Maybe just me. I just got a shirt that says classy, but I cuss a little. I thought it was funny. Anyway, but getting it really forces you to use the words that you have and find out what you're really dealing with so that we can understand greater where your challenges are. And I think that's what challenges us right now in looking, like people are always like us versus them, left versus right. And people who have adopted these ideologies that somebody else has put forth for them, they're using their language. So we don't even know what they're talking about. And we can't have, because we haven't adopted that language and what the feelings around it. And I think we do that culturally. I mean, of course, that's the thought that comes to mind first because of everything going on in our country. But I think we do that all the time. Just like case in point, saying crazy, like we've become numb to it when there are other meanings behind it. And we have to find the words, you know, and until we do, bananas works for me. You know, it's like we have to put those things together so that we can communicate. And I think that's, you know, that's what the challenges can be, is people not having the words to talk about what the feelings are and adopting someone else. It's really important to understand language. And we do talk about language a lot because a lot of times people, that's what helps people feel excluded. It's like one word, one sentence.
And that loadedness, right? Or that, like, you know, that articulate, you're like, oh, like, can we just agree articulate's not a great adjective anymore? Let's just put articulate on the shelf for like a generation or two. We'll come back to it when it isn't loaded anymore. Because it's got that loaded like derogatory othering part of it now, right? And I think seeing and noticing that's really important. If y'all haven't heard it, Brene Brown did a podcast talking about what had happened at the Capitol and phenomenon of dehumanization, and how the phenomenon of dehumanization is really something people use and exploit to create the systems and the patterns that we're seeing. It was really fascinating and some good stuff for me in trying to be more empathetic for folks that are not understanding or why they may be stuck in the places that they are. Because if I can't have like an empathetic understanding for why they are where they are, I may not be able to help someday. But it was really fantastic. So if you haven't listened to it, I'd highly recommend it.
She's one of my favorites, and I've not listened to that one, but yeah, I love listening to all of the interviews that she does and all of the conversations she has on her podcast, because I think one of the first people that she interviewed was, and now I'm going to, because this is what I do, I forget names. I'm not very, Tarana Burke was one of her first interviews, and that conversation just was on empathy and, you know, kind of how to think about some of these different topics and humanize humans again. Like, I think that's one of the pieces that also comes up so much. And I think the Capitol, you know, what happened at the Capitol is such an example of people, just going into this othering space where dehumanizing and not even thinking about like the conversation or the comments of, I just got swept up in it, or I didn't really, you know, we were just going there. And there is that piece that you go, I think they believe that. And I think that for some folks, it was just a mob mentality. I just went along because everyone else was doing it. But it's so scary to think about that, because I think that is what we've done for way too long. You know, we've just gone with the, oh, well, I believe what this person believes and we'll follow them no matter what. And I mean, I think Trump is such a great example of that, where you have folks that are like, oh, well, he did this or this, and that's why I'm a fan. So I just disregard the other stuff. And you're like, but how do you disregard someone just being, I can't, like, there are a lot of words. Most of
I was
them
like, all the cuss words just went through. She's thinking of the words.
I was like,
my mental Rolodex of what words.
I have a couple of choice ones that came up too.
Couple choice ones. Yeah. So anyhow, but yeah, I mean, I think the rehumanizing of people is something, and I know that's not really a word, but how do we actually look at folks as individuals and take them as individuals and have that empathy for their specific situation? And I think that's, you know, that's part of what we do every single day when we're working with organizations, is, you know, meeting them where they are, whether we agree with where they are or not, and whether, you know, we want to shake them a little bit and be like, I need you to move faster. But, you know, being open to that is so important.
I think you have to start though. I mean, Black people aren't looked at as people. They weren't looked at as people. So if you're talking about looking at people of color, you know, indigenous too, of being unvalued, it wasn't like they said, okay, I see you as whole, right? So it's really hard to empathize with something that you think has no value.
Yeah, I mean, I think
No, and I think when you're talking about the thinking, for sure, right? But I think of what's the thing that got them to the place that they're that affected, and because the actions of those people truly are the actions of damaged folks,
Mhm.
right? Like, you can't do something that horrific without being exposed to something really difficult, like without being put in like spaces of like trauma as well. And I think what's hard is in whiteness, there's been no dealing with trauma. And so there's not experience with trauma, and there's not the ability to like learn how to heal from trauma. And not that they have the same historical trauma at all, right? But there is some trauma that I think makes that thing happen. And it's super hard to like get there, right? And that's one of those things that I keep trying to work on, is seeing the scared hurt person that is making that thing happen. And I fall into the dimming of them and othering of them all the time. It's one of those things that I'm trying to get better at. Like Tara Brach is another person I listen to that helps me see like the humanness in people that are causing a lot of pain. Because I worry, I'm in this constant space of auditing myself, of can I be human enough that if someone came in and sat down and were willing to have tea with me, could I be patient enough to potentially heal them in some way? And then there's also the times where I'm like, yeah, today's not my day, and I am not the vehicle for this thing, and the patience isn't there, and I'm gonna hit the old eject button on this one because that's what I need to do to take care of myself in this moment, right? But it's hard. It's a real dynamic tension for me because I'm not saying by any means like they're dehumanizing of everybody else and what they've done with Black people or what they've done indigenous people and what they're continuing to do with stepping on Blackness and stepping on indigeneity with how they act. It's hard. But when I realize these are people infected by ideas that hopefully I can like take the idea away from the person, that perhaps they can heal. But I also have to remember I can't heal anybody without them wanting to. And that's that boundary setting. I think that's so important in what we do.
I think it's been the life-changing moment for me, oddly enough, came through a training through Junior League, which you would think is the last place that you would get like a good diversity training. But when we were there, when we were talking about people, the way that America became America, I hate saying like founded, because it was like here already. P.S.
Right.
You can't discover something that's already been found. Anyway, so that's a whole nother episode.
Absolutely.
But in thinking that people had to leave their own cultures, and since they had to leave everything behind in order to be accepted here, because we were looking at as race as an actual construct, right? So it was like, okay, so you're white. Wait, you have this thick Italian accent and your name is Mauricio. So you're not. It's like, wait, no, my name's Mark and I live in the United States of America. Because if you ask people, and that was part of our episode when it was like Black Jackye and Just White Katee, when we were talking about how those things come into play. And so I always explain to people, like, you have to remember generationally, we do get a little bit not complete, but we get insight into what the Black experience is.
Hi, I'm Cole Napper, host of Directionally Correct, the #1 people analytics podcast in the world. Come check out our podcast that dives deep into topics like people analytics, workforce planning, and talent intelligence, helping leaders across the globe navigate the future of work with insight and a little bit of fun.
They don't talk about the white experience. The mob mentality has happened forever. People, you can't tell me that everybody said, you know what, you're right. Beating people into submission for my will and like owning people, that's a great idea. I mean, that's a mob mentality that started, and it's because you weren't allowed to have a culture. So when you look at these groups that are organized and they can rally around being a person of color or being compassionate or having that understanding, and you don't have that, that's why people say things like, well, why don't we do white lives matter? Because it's like, well, I'm white and I'm not black, so I don't identify that way, so this isn't important to me. And I explain to people like, this happened to you too, because you've been told lies since the very beginning. And so on the one side, it's, you know, generational trauma. On the other side, it's generational lies that people really believe. And so in diversity, we talk about meeting people where they are. We have to open up and accept their truth. And so some people think I was owed this and promised this, and this person isn't. And that's what I've been told my whole life. And generationally, that's the way it's supposed to be. Like, they believe it as much as I can say, this is a pen. And so I don't think I can heal people, but I think by listening and having them share their story, they can get better insight. And I think those things are coming to fruition. And I think all of us, as we're talking in the diversity space, when we're meeting people that seem to be really adverse, I mean, there's your sign to start asking questions, you know. So why do you feel that way? How long have you thought this way? Where did that come from? How does that working for you? Without saying anything, and then all of a sudden they'll say you're the best diversity trainer they've ever had.
Right. Right. I think that's the magic. It's funny too, because I think when you say what you say, like, I have a friend, his name's Calvin Terrell. He's been one of the folks that helps me so much with what I do. And he's like, you know, all like most white people that came here were refugees. You know, like pilgrims weren't awesome folks. Like, you know, let's be honest. Like, these folks were so weird that they're like, I want the freedom to restrict people so much that I have to sail halfway across the world that is unknown at this point, so I can enact more oppressive rules on people because they think what I'm doing here is so weird that we want to go and do that there. But like, that's what colonization has done to white people, because again, there's not been a lot of discussion about like how white people have been colonized. I mean, those are the folks that have been colonized the most and longest, like, as white people. And that's like probably why we're seeing so much dysfunction, because like they have no connection to a sense of indigeneity, or they haven't had an experience of what is so amazing about blackness. Is like, blackness was like a thing that arose without a connection to land as a survival technique that was soul based only. Like, it's funny because everyone wants to indigenize stuff, and I'm like, I want to like engage in a process of blackness, because like there was something that happened at a soul level that created a sense of connection and wholeness and community as a survival technique to some of the most horrific things we've ever seen. Like, I'm like, I want to engage in blackness. Like, I want to like see spaces of like blackness. I want to see like practices of blackness where people like adopt some of these things to, again, I think, become more whole people, because it's that poison and the lie, like you said, of othering or you're not me, and it just hurts people.
I feel like the American dream is what they sold to get people to come over here to work these fields in the first place. Yeah. And because, I mean, we always talk about the American dream, but we never talk about like, was this an actual dream? Like, did someone like, who put that together? You know, we don't have a record of that. And so we get to fix it towards our narrative, you know. But I have a question. How, personally, kind of changing directions a little bit, but you talked about being like multiracial and having all of these pieces, and then living in Texas where there isn't a lot of indigenous people. How was that? I mean, I know you talked a little bit about like the assumption or different things or people bringing you in, but how was that growing up? What was that experience like?
I've heard
all of it from birth to now.
in 2 lines. No, I think
this is going to be a 7 podcast.
Right. I was born on a cold winter's day.
I think it's been the pain of my life, right? It's been the thing that I've been in a constant process of working through and healing from. But I've also heard whatever is the pain of your life is the thing that you have within you that you get to heal in others because you had to heal it within yourself. Um, and so it was hard and it's weird because like, there was no indigeneity to connect to, and I had no connections to my tribal affiliation. Like my father drank a lot of the stereotypical stuff, and we left him when I was very young. And so I have no direct connection to any of my tribal identities, because even the tribal identities we have were beaten out of us through Indian schools, because in Texas especially, like harsh, hard assimilation is what was done. And so going back to my great grandmother, like she was just kidnapped from an area called the Big Thicket, and then dropped off hundreds of miles away 7 years later, and then had to find home. And then we were always taught to hide our indigeneity because we were afraid of like our kids getting kidnapped. Like that was the only story of indigeneity we had. So it was hard, but the gift in what I had is that I always needed people. And so I learned how to get adopted by people. Like I learned how to integrate, not assimilate, like, and bring my sense of selflessness into this new space. I learned how to practice like a form like cultural humility, and that I'm always in the learning space. I also think that I recognize that like I think I know how not to do what's appropriation,
Mhm.
because like I've never really been in a culture, but I got adopted and became families of this culture by their own words. And so I know like how not to do appropriation, and that is just to be family and within groups, right? Because I've had so many Black folks that just adopted me because they're like, God, it must be really lonely out there for you now that I know you and your background. Get on in here. You're part of us, right? Like same thing with like Latino, Hispanic, Mexican folks, right? They just adopted me and brought me in. And that's a big part of what Native cultures have done historically too, right? Like there were women that were like, screw patriarchy, I'm gonna go join this tribe. Or there were like folks like fleeing slavery, right? And you're like, okay, well, you're Seminole with us. And that's just what they did and how they did it. And I think when you get down to brass tacks of humanity, that's how it can act. But it's hard because like there's so many silos of difference that are keeping us so separate. And there's this notion of you have to have or be part of this group to be safe. And that's not true. Like when you got family, you don't need millions of dollars or 7 homes. Like you just got people that got your back. And so you don't have to be scared because like you've got family. Like, and family doesn't have to be what could be at times the toxic people you were born into, like family exists in a much bigger space. But yeah, to answer quickly, I would say it was hurtful and hard. But then also it's been the lessons that I get to teach in my classes to different companies and things. And it's also a way of, I think another thing of what we do when people ask like, why should we have diversity training in companies? It's really a form of operationalizing dissent, because dissent and the ability to be like, hey, that's wrong, or hey, I don't agree, or hey, this is problematic, is what always has to happen in really truly inclusive spaces, because we're going to make mistakes with this stuff over and over again all the time. And like really creating an operation for dissent, really valuing what dissent brings to an organization and people to really come to best decision within a consensus is what we're trying to do. And I think that pain has also become my gift.
That's like a whole TED talk.
It definitely is. It's a lot of stuff to like attempt to unpack. So I'm curious to hear from you. How the heck did y'all get into this? I mean, that's kind of how I got into this. How
You
did
lost
y'all
the bet.
I bet you can't fix whiteness, classism, and sexism. Go.
The 7-part podcast. Well, I've been talking a lot, Katee. How did you get into this work?
Kind of by happenstance a little bit, but not. So I'm the youngest kids. Grew in Ohio. We moved when I was about 10 years old. And throughout my entire life, both my parents were educators, and they very much like exposing us to different things and exposing us to different cultures and different people. And one of the things they did every summer was throw us in the back of the van, and we would drive all over the US. So before I was 9 years old, I was in 31 of the 50 states. And yes, we went to the museums. We were not okay, go to Disneyland, because, two educators trying to buy tickets to Disneyland wasn't happening. So it was about museums, and it was about like learning about the people, and going into like families' homes and things like that, to just learn like who's around us and who do we not know and who's different from us. And that was such a great experience from my childhood, and that kind of carried into my career in HR. I joke around, and we actually just interviewed someone yesterday, Elena Kind, who is a storyteller, and she is all about, going out and finding stories. And that's what I consider myself. I'm not a storyteller. I'm a story like keeper, or a story, how to bring people along in the conversation, how to bring people's stories into whatever the work is. And so for me, it was being able to really understand the experience of different employees, understand that the experience was not the same, where so many organizations feel like, oh, we have this onboarding process and this recruiting process, and this, once they're here, this is what they do, and then they get voted, blah, 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 blah. And that's not the case for every employee walking in the door. So understanding that, and understanding like, how do you make it an equitable environment? How do you make a culture, or create a culture where everyone does have the same experience or opportunity for an experience? That really has always kind of been a guiding force for me, and was able to really dig in on it and work with some really cool organizations when I was at my last company, Daddy. And this just became like, oh my gosh, there's so much work to be done. And I'm not shy about talking about it, and I'm not shy about like having the hard conversations. And I also feel like I've had some great partners in learning and understanding. Obviously, Jackye is one of them, to say like, okay, tell me what this is like, or what, how should I do this the right way and not say the wrong things and that type of stuff. And so I've been very fortunate to have great people that have guided me along this path. But it really was, I was doing that work at GoDaddy, and I was getting calls. Hey, can you come help us with our culture? Hey, can you come do this with us? And it was kind of a aha moment of, this could be a business, and I could do this time and impact so many more people. And so I made the leap, and the rest is history. So yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's how do you get into different organizations globally, locally, and understand where they are today, and guide them on that journey, and help them through some of the hard questions and some of the, hard conversations. And, you were just mentioning, having those places where people can have the conversations and can ask the questions. And, we talk about psychological safety or bravery, or, however you want to approach that. And for me, it's, how do you help your employees have the conversations that they need to have, to say, this is my experience and it's not the same as everybody else, and to give them that safety to be able to do that in the right way. And also help the leaders with, okay, if you have an employee saying this to you, it's not a, hey, let's get mad. It's, what do we need to do to fix it? And really believing them and understanding that things need to change to make it better for everybody.
Yeah, I wanted to say, like, it's amazing to hear what you've been able to do at GoDaddy, because I mean, like, that organization seems to have been built on sexism and patriarchy, and I can tell from being in this area that they really evolved quite a bit, as far as like becoming more whole and helpful in that area. And it's interesting because that pattern that you're talking about, Katee, I see a lot of people that start out in HR, and then they get so good at HR that eventually they're like, okay, how do I like work in prevention from an HR standpoint rather than just responding to issues? because so many people are just stuck in that space. Like, what can we do to really be synergistic? What can we do to operationalize dissent? What can we do to work on culture? Like, one of my favorite questions to ask an organization is, what's your culture? And they're like, what do you mean? And I'm like, oh. Like, if you don't know, then whatever it happens to be is your culture. Like, unless you have an intentional idea of what this is and you're working to reinforce the concept and move towards a culture of blah, you'll never get there.
Absolutely. And I think, I think that's where so many HR folks and, Jackye and I interact with some of them, unfortunately, on a very daily basis, weekly basis, whatever you want to call it. And you have those folks that are like, no, we just want HR to be administrative. We just do the paperwork. And you're like, why would you not want to push further and make this better for all of your employees? And I mean, we've seen, even just in the last few months, a lot of folks have kind of themselves for their not very inclusive beliefs and not very, not good. They're just not good beliefs. And you think about that, and how does that kind of equate for the employee, and what does that happen? Like, what happens to that employee in that culture where you have someone who is themselves a racist, and it's very much all about, no, we want to keep things the way they are. We like the patriarchy, all of those things. Having to have those conversations and help educate people, it's good and frustrating. But I think the other part is it is about, how do you just get people to, exactly your point, like, get people to start thinking about, like, how can we do this better and more proactively, not just, hey, we don't want to get sued.
Yeah.
Because that has, I mean, for years, that was kind of the HR motto, like, how do we do a CYA to make sure that the organization doesn't get sued, versus how do we make this really cool for employees so they can just do great work? That's
It's
what
weird to see how much they've done. People talk about candidate experience, but they don't talk about the employee experience. And they put so much, I mean, and when I say that, I mean, like, they put money behind it. Like, they put money behind candidate experience, and the people who have to do the work are miserable, so it's like, that's not gonna work. I literally yesterday was showing a client, I do this little exercise about how you can't change what you don't acknowledge, and the company wants to have all these diversity initiatives, and I didn't even know who I was talking to, because I don't like knowing, because I'll get really nervous sometimes, like, oh, you're the chief diversity officer at Johnson & Johnson, and I'm little Jackye Clayton in Waco, Texas. Okay, cool. That's cool. So I try not to get into it too much, but it turned into like a preaching session. Because we looked at, was like, you've lost 4,000 people at your organization in the last 2 years. 50% of those are women. I was like, let's stop. Y'all ain't ready. I was like, y'all are not ready for diversity recruiting. If you lost 2,000 of the people that you lost were women, we've got a problem. Let's look. And so then we started looking at it. I was like, it's y'all sales department. and then I showed them the reporting. And at the end of it, they're like, you're just preaching now. They're like, you're just showing off. But I was like, no, like,
you're like, data. It's weird.
I am like the data dork. I love it. Unfortunately for them, I love finding things like that out and trying to find patterns. Like, oh my God, did you know that your head of accounting is racist? And they're like, what? I'm like, yeah, you've lost, 100 Latinx people in the last 5 years. That's weird, but not really, but I think
Jackye, I was curious to ask you, because like, y'all know, you probably do, the concept of positionality, like if you look at and build something from the lens of the most oppressed person, you're probably going to hit equity, because like, if you can do it from the most oppressed, like, intersectional identity, then everybody else has a pathway in. So you, like, given your positionality as a Black woman, like, this has to, you must bring great things, but then also it must be an incredible pain in the A, like, every day, like, as a Black woman attempting to do this work, because they'll be like, oh, she's a woman, oh, she's Black. Like, there's a million dismissers you have to get through, like, over and over again. Like,
it
how do you navigate
sucks, Rowdy. Thankfully, years of medication and therapy have made me able to be at this point. No, I
Well, first off, this is how that started too, was for the very reason, because it was these conversations of like, what world is happening right now? And sorry, did you, but like, that's part of it too, was just like these actions she was having, we're like, huh?
yeah.
So anyway, sorry.
And no, but I think it did come, it's hard. And I think the hardest part of this work for me is being so aware of oppression and being aware of my Blackness, and realizing that that is a problem for some people just walking in the room, like literally I have to talk to people about why they don't hire people like me, like, and I think the challenge that, what's interesting, I have these really great, crazy parents that always volunteered as tribute to like break down doors. And hearing those messages growing up, like I just thought that's what you did, like I'd be like, why are we here? And my mom would be like, because there's no Black people here. So we need to make sure they can hear from Black people. So we're going to go. And it was like, oh, okay. And like, I look for opportunities to volunteer as tribute. And I think that happens a lot with these organizations. It's really hard. I'm glad that I have friends within the space, but it's hard. What I learned, what was interesting is that we were taught 2 different lessons or 3 different lessons or 4 different lessons. Like your world may not be the same as mine and the lens is different.
Mm-hmm.
And I think something that was interesting kind of growing up, at one point, my dad was a reverend before he retired. And it was in the 90s. I had a lot of friends that were gay coming out of the closet and getting kicked out of the house. And they would come move into our house. And my parents are like really conservative, and the first person I got it, like they were being nice parents. But then we had like 5 18, 19, 20-year-old gay men living in our house. They were watching like Truth or Dare. And I was like, y'all have to get out of my house. Like, I don't like, that was a little much for me. But I was like, Dad, how did you do that? Like, I hear the lessons in the conservative, ism. And how do you do that? And he was like, because we love the person. We love the person. And I remember growing up, like we had guests over for Thanksgiving once, and them being like, I was like, who are these people? And they're like, oh, they're homeless people. And that's kind of how I was raised, where we had underrepresented people. I know that, like, I'm a woman of color that comes from a place of privilege. So it's like a weird spot. But I always knew that I would be strong enough to be able to be in those situations. And that you have to stand strong. And as I got older, it became more important for me to do it for the generations behind me. Because, I was a recruiting manager. I could still be a recruiting manager and make, about the same money. But I think it's so important of people getting the message right. And not that I have all the answers, but I've seen so many people do this work wrong.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I tell people, like, I want to change the world one recruiter at a time. And also the big reason why I got into this is because when I realized that the way that they were teaching, they were not going to be able to find me. People were not going to be able to find me. And so I wanted to help open those things out. But to answer your question, yeah, it sucks. And there are days where I, at least once a month, I feel like calling in Black. Like, that's what I call it.
You're like, you get a Black day off.
Yeah, I'm just tired. And they're like, what? It's like, I'm tired of explaining to, white people why they need to be equitable. It's just exhausting.
Yeah.
But I think it's so necessary. And like, if not me, then who? I think I kind of I'm in that space, but it's also comes from a being infinitely curious,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
especially now. I would love to have that man, your little friend with the horns, come over and sit down with me, talk about Hugh and how he got into those spaces.
Yeah. What was the slippery slope that was like,
Did you eat glue? That's what I'm going to ask. Let's start. Did you ever eat glue? Just curious. Just,
You need a hug.
were you vaccinated? I'm just writing this down.
That kid definitely needs a hug. You know what's bananas?
Yeah.
He went to Moon Valley High School, and that's probably like a few blocks from where I live. Like it's not super far from where I'm stationed.
Yeah.
But I wanted to say to both of you, like, I just admire the hell out of y'all. Because like I do what I do as part-time because honestly, like getting to teach these ideas and concepts in both interpersonal communication, because there's a lot of patterns that happen with interpersonal communication that are directly linked to like inclusive issues, right? As well as intercultural. It's easy. Like I'm talking to people that are like, yeah, this is a great idea. Why wouldn't we do it? Like they adopt stuff like that because they're just like, oh, I can see where this is no good. I can see where like, you know, I've become addicted to like patterns of toxic people or toxicity, and I've seen them as normative, and like I've replicated those patterns. Like, so I get to be in a space of like happiness and growth, and then like I get to take that chargedness into different companies from time to time. But y'all like live there, you know, like my regular experience is finding, you know, I go out into the world where it's hard to find new and creative ways to explain it better to my students, because it keeps my edge sharp. But y'all like live there, and it's funny because people are like, you could make more money out than that place, and I'm like, oh, I'm sure, but like it's hard, and there's like a huge, you know, the cost of humanity for like the $150,000 salary, like maybe isn't worth the, you know, like the $80,000 trade-off in difference, you know. So I did want to say and acknowledge that from you two. Like y'all are amazing, badass. I'm sorry, like it's the only.
Do we have to give you a copay? Because really, we are like, because I feel like, I mean, yeah, thank you for saying that and acknowledging that, because so many people don't acknowledge that, that it's hard, and you get a lot of pushback and grief. And we have another, a friend of ours that was in the business on Facebook that was like blocking people today, like having, because he has this pushback and sharing his views, and it can be hard. I think sometimes I don't know who has it harder, me or Katie, depending on the day. But sometimes I think, gosh, Katie, that must be rough of going in. Like I go in as a Black woman and people just assume I know everything about diversity. Katie gets to go in, you know, but they also think that I'm going to whine and complain about it because of the benefit of me, even though I don't work there, and, you know, they're not even paying me enough, and I don't even have time for snacks. So stop. And then Katie walks in and they assume she's completely biased with her cute little jacket and pearls on. It's like, oh, but they have no idea. I'm sure you set that straight within the first 5 minutes, Katie.
I want to take a break real quick just to let you know about a new show we've just added to the network. Up Next at Work, hosted by Jackye and Katee of the Devon Group. Fantastic show. If you're looking for something that pushes the norm, pushes the boundaries, has some really spirited conversations, Google Up Next at Work, Jackye and Katee from the Devon Group.
Well, Rowdy, yes, thank you very much. I think the driving force for me is when you see that light bulb go off. You know, the one, and I use this example often, sitting in a calibration meeting. So where you're talking about employees on different teams and how you rated them from a performance review perspective, and having a leader correct another leader who's speaking about someone who is a woman of color and saying, oh, she's aggressive, she's this, she's that. And having that other leader go, yeah, that's not the language we are going to use. How is their performance and how are they living the values, and really focusing. And you're sitting there going, oh my God, it's working. Like, hey, wow, they get it. They're hearing me. And they actually, because there are times when you walk away from a workshop or a conversation, you're like, I don't know if they got it. Like, I don't know if they understood, but when you see them using language and using concepts that you've talked to them about, and there is that little, like, I always chuckle when I hear like a CEO use like the same language that I used with them. And you're like, oh, okay, they were listening to me. and if they want to adopt it as their own way of thinking, awesome. Like I'm totally fine with that. But it is kind of funny because you'll have those moments where you'll see that light bulb go off, you'll hear the language being used, and it just feels so good. But then there are other days when you're like, I'm going to go in my room and cry for a little while and it's going to be okay. Because I think that's part of it too. And I think that's right now, anyone in any organization doing any role, there is this piece where it's the balance that we all have to strike of keeping ourselves safe and okay, mentally, physically, etc. Not just sitting on the couch binging, Tiger King and, ice cream all day. There are days that should happen and other days that you should not do that. So anyways, yeah, I think thank you.
Well, yeah, and two, like if y'all don't, like, at some point in time, raise your rates and be like, this is my counseling costs. You know what I mean? Like, because I would love to see counseling and like our group of folks just be like, okay, we're co-conspirators here. Like, why don't you bring us aboard to help you understand certain things that are happening, like in interpersonal spaces where you're seeing oppression and blah, blah, blah work out. Because they do have a hard time teasing some of those concepts out, right? Like what is, like, in higher ed, like kids don't know, like what's just college is harder than high school and what's racism. They're like, and I'm like, well, this is racism and this is college is just harder than high school, because if you don't know, it's hard to tease those things apart. And then, because they need to know and understand what's the difference between those things. But I'd love to see some like partnership or alliance for like diversity folks and like counseling and just be like, hey, counsel me for like an hour a week. I'll volunteer like an hour a week with y'all and like talk you through some concepts and ideas where you might be struggling with people. I think that alliance would just do each of us all types of good. But yeah,
I think you're right. And by the way, that doesn't change as you get older. Like, is this racism or is this like,
oh yeah.
And, I'm loud and people will say that I'm loud. And so then when I'm angry, I'm sure it's louder, the worst thing that someone can say to me is shush, you're being loud. Right. Then I just like, having to hold it all together. But then you have to sit and say, okay, was I triggered? Was I responding to something outside of what was going on? Or were they trying to be the tone police?
Right.
And trying to control me as a Black woman? Or was it a combination? And do I care? Right. That comes into play a lot.
Well, I think just being in a space where you're like, am I loud or am I just extroverted? You know what I mean?
I know I'm loud.
Like, can you ask the question? Because like extroverted and loud are loaded linguistically incredibly differently, right? Like my college president, he's a Black man. And like we've had a lot of conversations of like, well, what is racism? And what is like things in a system that are just difficult to adapt to, because he came to the Maricopa system outside of like me being within it. And so we've been able to have conversations with like, well, this is like, some of this is institutional resistance to change. Some of this is racism. And like, how do you tease those things apart? But you're right. Yeah. It's just one of those things that's just, you're always in this diagnostic process. And like, again, that's just exhausting. And it's so much of a cost of our humanity. But that's why I call what we do healing. I mean, I know you may not be comfortable with that language, but for me, the way I summarize my purpose for people is I help others heal themselves. And in that same process, I get healed a little bit more in their wholeness. And that allows us to come together as community a little bit better to make the world a little bit better of a place. And when you're really clear on who you are and what you're doing, why you're doing what you're doing, I think it helps a lot. But I mean, to not acknowledge that there is healing that happens, I think is also to not see what you're doing too.
I love
also
healing. I love that.
Yeah.
And I say that
It's-
too. It took me a lot of years. I probably had been doing it for 7 years before I realized that so much of what we do is internal work. And so many people are afraid about being called out that you have to open the door and hope that they do the exercises, kind of, like to Katie's point, like, oh, they did it. Like you have to kind of hope that they can have that revealing. And then you also have to realize that some of these things, you are opening up trauma that you didn't realize. I mean, me and Katee did a session together with a client, and do you remember, like 50% were crying? We were talking about being young women in business and um having that come back. And then one person, I was like, oh snap, because one person was like, I didn't realize that until just this minute. I was like, oh no, like we totally need to call Oprah quick because we went all the way there. But a lot of it is internal. And once you realize that, it's like, what else have I been ignoring? What have I been suppressing? What have I been a part of? And you're not going to do that in a half day, 1 month. It's bringing things to people's attention. And I think I had the conversation yesterday, like I am pain averse like everyone is. And we're talking about what was going on in Trump losing, he's not on Pinterest anymore because okay, they just had to get their logo on the board.
No more arts and crafts from Trump.
No
was he
more.
posting? Was it like workouts?
I
Or
don't
like,
think he was, but no more chicken Kiev
Yes.
recipes.
Yes, workouts. That's what he was.
his Pilates routine?
Here's how the hamburger goes
memes.
out. Yeah.
Obama memes. So, but it's like at the same time, it's like I like the devil, I don't want people to be silenced. If they do that to them, they could do that to us. And I was like, I don't want to have to open up an account somewhere to try to find out what people are saying. And it's always a big thing of, it is the healing of letting them know what the effect is. Like I always go back to like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. How is this affecting me? And now that you have that information, because I don't think people, it's one thing to say, oh, we need to overturn the election because Donald Trump won it and people cheated. It's another thing to say, I thought I was going to be killed. I had to call my husband and tell him where their will was. Like, I don't think anybody wanted that to happen, right? And when you realize that's what we're seeing now, people coming out of the open, now realizing the effects and the impact of what they do. Now, that is an extreme situation, but I think everybody has pieces on a personal level where we are opening up wounds with our work. And we also have to do it within the jobs that me and Katee do. We have to look at it from a corporate perspective. And it's hard because you have to reel it back. Like we're not going to have abuse day in diversity class. And how does that make that? But we know those are things that are there. And so you have to have a lot of various resources. And so that's kind of hard sometimes to manage. But it comes back to what we said, kind of what you were mentioning at the very beginning, that these are hurt people. There's a lot of hurt people that've got a lot of mixed messages that they wrestle with. And it's a lot more comfortable to pretend it's not there. When people bring it to your attention, they respond in different ways.
Yeah, I mean, so much of it is hurt people, and like, again, like talking about those folks, like to give away so much autonomy, so much of your own power, and to just follow, like the guy with his feet on the desk of Nancy Pelosi was like a retired firefighter, but like when you look at like, that was a regular dude who was just like a firefighter. And like now, like they're talking about like sentencing folks up to 20 years, like another thing, my friend Calvin Terrell, who we get to hear about from hopefully Katee, when he talks about privilege is an isolating force that makes you think you have to hoard and accumulate power and resources to the point that you don't need any other human in the world. What a sick way of seeing the world. You know, as humans, as pack animals, like that's so antithetical to the human experience. You know, like the idea as a male that like I can do masculinity so perfect, or that I can like so good at patriarchy that I never need women ever again, except for as like sex objects. Like, how sick is that idea? And like, how infected must I be to believe in it? You know, and like, I'm still in that process of like, because that I still have the same reaction. You know, I'm on your podcast, so I'll say it. Like when I saw the 6th, it was much worse than 9/11 for me. Much worse, right? As a person of color, as someone that identifies as like Native American, indigenous, like I don't get to go anywhere else. This is home. Like I can't go to Europe. Like this is my land, and I'm not giving it up. Like it was much more traumatic because like this is like a member of your family coming into your room and threatening you. Whereas like, you know, you knew with 9/11, like it was, you know, of course it wasn't going to be a nation. It was another group of people that like had an ideology that they wanted to spread, but the threat wasn't us. Like the threat was like from outside, and it wasn't even a nation. It was just a small group of people. Like here, the threat is here, and it's us, and there's no real way of parsing out all that stuff. And it feels like there's so many more people spreading disease than wholeness and health. It's funny, I tell my students in Com 110 all the time, like, you know, you pay me like $300 to take this class. Like, it's funny because like a CEO, I'll charge like $5,000 to do the same stupid class, like stuff, but they'll like have to pay me $5,000 to go through those processes because their ego won't allow them to enroll in a $300 class.
You know what?
Right.
Put that in a Hallmark card, because that is fabulous. We need to
Yes.
Rowdy has to come back because we need to talk about that. That is so hilarious. Their ego won't let them to do the continuing ed. They're not coming. They're not coming to audit a class. I think a part of this though is looking for enemies. We've ran out of enemies. We got Al Qaeda. 9/11 thing is over. And you know, talking about diversity and inclusion and how America rolls. So from the time of the Pilgrims, I was like, I'm a big Rocky fan, and I was like, look at Rocky 4. How can you make a movie where the whole movie is about your hatred for another country, and at the end, when you think that the Russian guy died, people are cheering with an American flag boxers on? It's horrific. Like I decided when I do my webinars, I'm going to go show like Gen X references that we've gotten through the years, because people today wouldn't even believe that exists. Like we hate all of the Russians, like as a country,
Right.
all of them.
Like there's some random person in Mongolia that's just like, I'm just doing my thing. I'm just like eating food. Like I'm just living my life. Why are you hating on me? I don't even know you exist.
Hate you. You're the enemy.
Right.
You know, like, and we had a whole culture of that. And now it's like, okay, who do we hate? We'll just eat ourselves.
I did this whole podcast on how we're so focused on enemy when really we need to be focused about the enemy that is in a me, right? What is the thinking within ourselves that like we're needing to heal? Because like enemies only exist when you got the enemy in a me.
Right?
Right?
When you gonna put that on a shirt? He's got good ones. Are you right? We gotta go back and write these down. That is a good one.
But like if you were whole, like if you were really like okay, like if you like I kind of always envision like what is like Rowdy the Buddhist monk like look like, the enlightened Buddhist monk, and like
same haircut.
People at the Capitol and just be like, you must be hurting a lot to be that way.
Yeah.
It must be very lonely. I'm working on that. So
it's good. All right, my friends. Last question for you, Rowdy. Well, actually two, sorry. First one is, where can folks find you?
Well, I've got one of the more Googleable names in history, Rowdy Duncan. There really is just the me that's out there. And so there's never been a more findable person. But I have Instagram. I'm not great at like taking pictures and uploading. It's not like what I enjoy slowing life down enough to do. I have the Inclusive Activism podcast, which I attempt to do bi-weekly. And I've got one out on colonialism, and I've got another one that's going to be coming out on indigeneity and how to do more of those things. I'm on Facebook. I have my own website, inclusiveactivism.com, and you can email me at inclusiveactivism@cox.net as well. And there was another one? Did I get both?
That was the first question. The second question is, for anyone that is listening or watching, what is the one, gosh, I really want you to take this away from this conversation and, kind of take action from it? Or what is the one thing you want people to make sure they heard?
I think for me, like what I'm finding myself wanting to work on most often is people that agree with us that are othering people all the time, right? Like I see social justice warriors smashing people and othering people over and over again all the time, not understanding they're using the tools of the oppressor and it's not making anything better. Don't worry so much about like the people out there, and do like your work inside and talk about your stumblings and your failures and how you've made the mistake, because that's what gets people to connect with your humanity, and that's what will get them to want to heal like you did. So don't think you got to go teach everybody everything. Like engage in your own healing process and talk about your own healing process, because that's what get people to self-disclose the areas they need to heal. And then you actually can have a conversation about how you will both heal in a process of sharing the trauma and learning from the healing. Because when I heal you, I learn how to heal myself. When you heal me, I learn how to heal myself, but you also learn how to heal yourself in the same way. Like it's so amazing how wholeness comes from these processes. And that's why I enjoy what we're doing. And so I'd say the one takeaway is like, heal yourself and talk about how you're healing yourself, and stop like trying to catch everybody. Stop gotchaing everybody doing it wrong, like more so be like, you know what, I used to say this thing too. I used to say crazy all the time too. In indigenous cultures, crazy people were the healing people. They weren't crazy. They saw the world differently, and they gave us the ability to do something different. So they weren't crazy. They honored and revered people because they saw the world differently. Like imagine schizophrenia is like a potential vehicle for healing, and it was in indigenous cultures across the world. Like, so I think it's like uncoupling some of those things and seeing the world in a new space too.
Awesome. Thank you. Miss Jackye, what you got?
I think for today, it's that to remember that, when you're being inclusionary, that means everyone. And it kind of goes to the othering. Like you will damage yourself if you surround yourself with groupthink and don't have people that have a difference of opinion. That difference of opinion is what helps you grow. So the people that are traumatic and triggering, block them. Don't friend them. Don't engage. But people that and have had a relationship pre 2016, it's important that we include everyone into the conversation. That's how we get those pathways to healing.
Awesome. I think for me, the comment that you made about this work being about healing, which is kind of even just what your summary was right there. Like, how do we continue to move down this path and continue this journey, and really think about in regards to healing and how to heal each other and how to heal yourself. I think that's something that it's just a different lens, kind of looking through it from a different direction. I think that's so important because there is so much hurt around these topics and around this, what you should believe, what you should think, all of these things. And so I thinking about it from that healing perspective, I think is really important. So Rowdy, thank you for joining us. We truly appreciate the conversation. This has been another episode of the Inclusive AF podcast. Thank you for joining us. This is Katee Van Horn.
And I'm Jackye Clayton. Bye.
Bye.